Hi there, I'm Adam Gilbers, and this is my novel Life Choices. Cliff Bannerfield is sitting in his chair. He is in the police precinct. He is quite comfortable with himself. He looks around, he looks at the people. He is in a mental state where people look around and think about all the others. Or they are in a world of blissfulness, where they enjoy themselves. This is a mental state where you feel yourself great for whatever reason, for things that may come, things you have accomplished, things you will get rewards or whatever. This mental state where you elate yourself above others, where you presume that those people who are bustling around you, that they actually do not know anything, that their efforts to manage their daily lives is in vain, or that they have not grasped the big story, the big history of life that would be important, that one needs to understand, to grasp what life is all about. And Cliff Bannerfield has a facial expression that tells or is telling that he is comfortable above all others, and he thinks about all what might happen and all what may come to him, all the prospects. He looks at his watch. He assumes that by right now, Jason and Frederick may have already stashed the drugs he gave them. This is to be his great clue. This is going to be his breakthrough as a police officer. This is what he has deserved. Redemption Day. This is what Cliff Bannerfield thinks about it. And this guy, this someone, Thomas Duncan, whoever he is, Cliff even ruminates and chews over the name Thomas Duncan. Well, it doesn't seem to fit to a guy like him, to someone who is not even American. This is how he assumes it. This is how he thinks about it. Thomas is a white man's name. Duncan is a white man's surname. Well, these things, they do not really fit to someone. Do not fit to someone who is supposed to be just, or this wouldn't have happened to him. This is what Cliff Bannerfield thinks about. What happened to others? What befalls others? If you are just, if you do the right thing, then you are already on the right path and along the righteous path. There are no evil animals. There are no fiends. There are no anyone who could harm you and who could rob you of everything, of all your possessions. In his imagination, Cliff Bannerfield thinks that he is one of the good guys, that he is one of those victims, that he is one of those people who are struggling and who deserve some luck, people who are the common man as they think themselves, not knowing that their perception of the world and their self-perception is actually indeed doubtful. They have a misconception of themselves. However, he is undeterred of it. Cliff struts to the vending machine. He gets himself a coffee. He enjoys himself. But in all this time where he had concocted, he and his fellow members had concocted their plan to get rid of Thomas Duncan and get a reward for it. This lifetime criminal, and who knows and who can say anything about it. Because according to Cliff Benderfield, it is just a matter of time until one of these folks would get criminal. So whatever. Why should they be bothered? They only help this. They need to find itself. However, in all this time, Cliff Benderfield has not thought about one rule, one unwritten rule, which is pretty much known in the police precinct and beyond that. And this rule means that if you incarcerate someone of color or any member of a majority, you have to get another fella policeman who belongs to the same majority as the incarcerated, in order to prevent any assumption that there would be a racial injustice. This is very common. This is what the police has established, especially after all those hate crimes, that they have to prevent that the public has to perceive that the police force would be racist. Therefore, for everything that happens, if a black youth or anyone from a minority is incarcerated or beaten up, whatever, then you will always find a black policeman or a policeman who belongs to the same minority, who comes then forward and then expresses his opinion. Of course, these are the opinions of the police precinct, and that the police is never wrong no matter what happened, because everything is excusable. Oh, there are some exceptions only then when there is public outcry. However, you always have to be aware of how things work and how things are perceived. And this is what many people in the police precinct understood and grasped. So whenever you have someone, especially James Duncan, who is colored, you need another fellow black officer who has to look over it and who has to make aware to James Duncan before he makes his phone call that the reason why he was brought in is not because he's black. This is very important before he can make his call. Well, fortunately, or sadly in that sense, Thomas Duncan did not make his phone call so far. He wasn't allowed to. He was just thrown into a jail, and who knows? And even though he has the right to make for his phone call, well, this is something Hollywood invented. These things, they can be delayed. You can come up with all kinds of excuses that the line is busy, whatever, or even your lawyer. You don't think that you can get a lawyer at once. No, they will hold you. However, Cliff forgot about it, but other people did not, especially those supervisors in the police precinct who were installed after those racial upheavals, when the public was willing to lynch police officers. Those supervisors who meticulously note who was brought in, who is incarcerated, who is in the jail, and who then inform all other key players, inform them that there is a minority in jail. Those people, those supervisors did not forget, and they called immediately to someone. And some of them, of course, knew Cliff Benderfield. They knew that he is working alone, that he doesn't like to work alone, especially after what they heard about him. So they just brought in a supervisor, named someone Shane Jones. Shane Jones was an average guy. He is an average guy. He was not remarkable in any sense, despite the fact that he's colored. He does not really perceive himself as black. He thinks of himself as a Latino. This has to do with the fact that his father is black, but his mother is white, and that Shane, thinks of himself not as a really black guy, and he does not imagine himself as a black guy, and he does not associate with other blacks, because for Shane, well, everything has its place, and Shane occasionally even feels embarrassed for his people. He says, well, in a way, he says, or he is convinced that these people are, in a way or another, responsible for their own fault. They chose this life, and therefore you should not bring anything, or you should not bestow any pity on them. This is always the word people use instead of racial slurs, whatever you have. So Shane was very liked in the police precinct. Why? Because he did not make a fuss about color. You could bring him in for anything, even though something may have racial connotation. Shane would make things always right. He would some sort of assuage tension. He would disclaim any notion of racial injustice. Shane was the guy everyone needed. Shane was the guy you could talk to the press, who would always take side of the police, who would always defend. And Shane was kinda appealing to everyone. He was nice. He always tried to be down to earth, but this was only role acting. Shane was actually very arrogant. He was sure of himself. This sometimes comes with colored people, especially when one part of their parents were white. Then they sometimes assume that they are better than both, or that they have some special ingredient, that they would combine the advantages of both. For Shane, this was that white people are smarter and black people are physically stronger. And Shane thought that Shane thinks that he has some sort of combined both of it, like many of his fellow colored members, that he is therefore better than both. And even though society does not permit us to arrogance beyond the acceptability, yet he was like this. He was in love with himself, and he would use any opportunity whatsoever to get in to the lamplight, because Shane was dreaming of it, that one day maybe he could be or become an actor, a very Hollywood star, and everyone would know him. Everyone would get to know him, his name, his face, and of course, he would get something in return, not only fame, but possession. This is how he thought about the limelight, as grabbing something, as incorporating something to his appearance, to its appeal, and to its body. And Shane looks over James Duncan. He sees what this man is all about and more thinks to himself, could this story get to somewhere? Shane does not think whether James Duncan is right or whether he is innocent or whether he's guilty. Shane only thinks about one thing, and this is whether he can get anything out of it, get in the lamplight, soothe tension, soothe the fear of, firstly, of many white people who are afraid of another outburst of violence, who are afraid of vandals, who are afraid that there would be another social upheaval where people point finger at them and accuse them of whatever they want. And even more progressive and liberal whites do not like social upheavals, especially if they are racial. Why? Because most of them live in gated, well-fed and bred suburban communities. And whenever there is a social upheaval, whenever black youth go and walk the streets and point out their dire circumstances and even say that they have not the chance to live in suburban areas. No, they have to live in hoods where there is almost no infrastructure whatsoever, where people inherit the life of their ancestors. Then they point fingers indiscriminately on white people, at white people, and even more progressives and liberals who would be more forthcoming to the cause of blacks. Even they get into the crossfire. Even they are pointed with the finger at. So these white folks, they don't like social upheaval, especially when they try to gain something of it, because in recent years, the white leftist elite has understood one thing, that the past is over and that it is not easy anymore to stay and put yourself in front of a minority movement or in front of a black community who are socially disadvantaged and who speak out against it, that they mostly do not want a black person to claim, as they say, there what's right fully yours. They do not trust a white person anymore, even though he is a Democrat, even though he is a leftist. No, they demand someone of their own. They demand another fellow black man or black woman to represent them. They think, and this is, you can call it common misconception, they think that a fellow black man or a fellow black woman would understand the worries and struggles of others, and therefore he would not harm himself or he would not harm his own community. Well, this is risky thinking. This would be like if only fellow white men would understand the struggle of white men, or if you assume that a white man or an American, a true patriot who loves America, this patriot or this business owner would not pack up his company and would leave to the Far East to run sweatshops, but yet they do. However, this is what the black youth thinks more and more. They don't want a white man. They don't want a white woman standing in front of them and telling them, yeah, we understand what you are. No, they want one of them standing there in front of them and understand someone who understands their anger and takes it into the capital and into the government to make them heard. And this has become more and more problematic for the white, progressive and liberal community, because they had gotten used to being always the ones people would approach and ask for guidance. But this new youth who comes along, who goes on the streets, who is even violent, vandalizes everything, they are against white people, even though progressive. No, they want their own kind to represent themselves. And Shane knows of these fears, and he knows even of those fears of the non-committed, as he calls it. And the non-committed are people who are apolitical, who do not really care about politics, people who only care about politics when it has to do something with their vicinity, with their life circumstances and the effect they could feel immediately. That's when they somehow sort of wake up from their slumber and start to care about politics. It is like when your own home is about to get flooded by water, that you assume, well, now it is probably the time that I join the community effort to fight the flood. And Shane has, in his way, a great understanding of people's fear. He learned to soothe his people's fear, like many black folks who have a white mother or who have a parent who is white. They always had to soothe other people's fears. They always sought and had to assuage people's prejudices. This is like that black folks would be that way, and that you would have to expect from black people this and that. What are these prejudices? What are some of these prejudices? What are we talking about? And one prejudice, of course, is that black folks would be somehow stupid. And this leads to white people occasionally thinking that they have to explain everything to black people twice or three times. They think that they should not use any complicated language, whatever this means. So they talk in a different way. They think that black folks, that they actually do not speak proper English, or that they would not understand proper English, or that they would be all dumb. So they speak differently, or they assume or are afraid of this angry black man. Sadly, Hollywood still sells it in masses, this angry black man who is willing to destroy everything, whatever comes his way, and who has to be soothed and so on. And of course, the lustful black man who eyes white women, who wants to possess white women, who wants to get rid of any white man in order to have all white women for himself. This is the fear of many white people. And if you, as a colored, a minority, a foreigner. You can be even a Mexican, and people, especially white people, will pretty much feel the same. And if you live among this community, you have actually two choices to make. You can either do not care. You can say whatever, let them think what they have. I do not care and I do not socialize with these people. Well, you could say that, but this is not a good choice. It is not smart. Smart. Why? Because if you some sort of live as an outcast and a social pariah, you will struggle to climb the social ladder, or you will struggle to accomplish something. The only time you can abandon a social bond or a social community or whatever you have, if you are wealthy enough to not care, or if you are wealthy enough, or if you have a lot of influence so that you can do whatever you want because people are dependent of you and dependent from you. So either way, you can slap them, do whatever you want with them. They will in the end all come back and hold your beer. And the other choice you have is that you have to some sort of appease and have to address those worries. You will probably not have success in trying to talk sense with these people, like saying, no, don't you worry, this is only a prejudice. Black men are not after white women. Well, you will not get far with this, or that black folks, that they are actually smart, and that the reason why people assume that they're dumb is because most of them did not have a chance, neither in the past nor in the present, to attend school. So this is the reason. Well, you can talk that way, but again, you probably will not get far. And life is not about a group. Life is not about some unimaginable group. No, life is about you. And you, no matter who you are, you stand in front of it. Your face is part of a social community. And if you want to be perceived as an equal in a social community consisting totally of white people, then you have to appease and assuage their fears. And how do you assuage their fears? Well, you make them believe, or you make them believe that you are not like all these others. This is, again, a choice you make even, and sometimes you have to make these choices, because what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is you could get nothing. The alternative is that in a society where you are dependent on these white folks, that you could lose out. And what is it about? This is what you have to weigh out. What is good for me? What is good for my family? But however, if you want to accomplish something, you have to assuage their fears, and you assuage their fears in making them believe, well, you are different. This is why it is easier for colored folks, especially those who have one part of their parents is white. It is easier for them to make other white people believe that they are not like all the other black folks, that they have this white gene, whatever this is. But for many white people, this white gene is an indication of superiority, no matter their political affiliation. If the left would think and assume that black folks are equal, they would intermingle with them and not live apart from them and only talk to them and with them before elections. So no matter what political affiliation, there is this notion that white people are superior. They are brought up in that sense. Even though you want to deny it, even though you want to disclaim it, if you are born by white, or if you are white, male or female, if you're born white, and if you have grown up in a white community, in a white suburban area, went to white schools where mostly no black folks were around, no one, and if you go to a job where all the CEOs and all the leading executives are white and only the janitor and those who are in the bottom half of the social ladder, only there are minorities, then you get a certain perception of society. And this may not happen consciously, no matter whether you believe in subconscious or not, but this mostly happens in subconsciously. You perceive a certain ranking, a certain social structure, which you assume may be right. Why do you think it's right? No, you think it's right because you feel comfortable with it. You have been around this social structure for all your life. If you are a white male or female, you have been around white people, you have white friends, you have been working in superior positions with other fellow white folks. So you think this has all it's right, this is all rightful, and you feel comfortable with it. And what difference does it make if you come forward thereafter and say, yeah, well, we and I care about black folks and I wanna do them right? Well, do you even know how to do them right? Do you even know what they go through? Do you even know what they struggle and so on? So there is fear among white people, especially those who want to help and some sort of fancy themselves and want to flatter themselves that they are different from all fellow white people whom they assume, I don't know how and why this perception persists within the leftist white communities, that the conservatives and the far right, or well, it is probably true for the far right, but that conservatives would not like black folks and they rather would live away and apart from them. However, but they think and assume that they would hate them and they want to make good for it, make good, of course, for their own advantage. Nothing is free. Nothing is for loose ends. Nothing. You don't do anything for free, even though if it is helping people, at least you will gain some social appeal because of it. And Shane was their man. And Shane was one of these people who learned to assuage them, assuage them, their fear, so that they felt comfortable around them. Shane in the past thought that it is because he can talk with them that he could successfully perceive them, to accept them as one of their own. So when Shane with his mother's family would hang out, their mother's family, they would always claim to all their friends that Shane would be different. This has to do with the fact that Shane's mother's family, that they never felt comfortable with Shane's mother marrying a black man. They thought it is stupid. It is stupid not because they are racist. And so no, they thought that if you are a black man in America, and they were well aware what it means to be black in America, that you burden yourself. And especially if you are white woman or white man, and if you marry interracially, you burden yourself unnecessarily, especially when you have children. They will grow up, even though you are a white, even though you are a privilege and have privileges, your children, because of their skin color, will lose them, so they will have nothing. And it could be, and this is what many white or interracial couples fear, that they would not look alike their children, and therefore their child would not be a part of them. Because in a way or another, you want your child to look after you, look like you, to resemble you, to be a part of you. And if you marry interracially, then you have a fear that you might not recognize your child, or that this notion of the races, that every human race would be so far apart that you can hardly understand anything or anyone, so that there would be a huge racial gap, which would prevent each of the human races, firstly, to understand each other properly, and secondly, to communicate with each other properly. So everyone then asks himself, why do interracial couples get together? And the assumption, mostly, especially when white women marry black men, is that it is all about sex. That she has probably only gotten a fancy for this black man because he is probably well endowed. So that there are other ways to satisfy one's lust. This is what Shane's mother's family thought. That this is unnecessary, that this is just a fad and you should not go along with it. And there are, of course, other reasons why white women marry. It can be love, of course, if we believe that there is something like that, and we wanna believe, we don't wanna destroy this illusion. But however, it is not socially accepted. And why would anyone marry, especially a woman who has privileges? Why would she go through this torment? Why would she then lose itself and everything just for a fancy? And what is love? Love is something that never holds, and it is indeed very rare that you can get fulfillment. But however, this was thought. So Shane was never really accepted, and even Shane's mother's family thought that there is this racial gap, that there is this huge gap which prevents white folks from understanding black folks. And this has to do with the fact that first, okay, of course, they live apart from each other, and secondly, that they do not seem to have different cultures, and each of these groups emphasize more and more willingly that there is a difference. There would be a difference between how black folks think and how white folks think, and these differences are always emphasized like that. White folks, they would be some sort of more the scientists, that they would have a scientific worldview, whatever this means, assumably that white people only think in numbers, proportion, mathematics, well, whatever, and that black folks, that they would be some sort of more emotional, more sentimental, that they would fill the world with all their emotions and their desires. Well, those people who are racists and who want to confine black men and who are afraid of black man's physical abilities, well, they do it because of emotions, because of a feeling of inferiority. So you never can really separate these things. But yet people still propagate this assumption, still cling on it. And so were Shane's, and so are Shane's mother's family. In the end, they got around to accept Shane as one of their own. His grandfather from his mother's side would even exclaim proudly that he has a grandchild who is smart and who is black, that they understand each other well. Well, he said that mostly in order to claim that he is not racist, that he is not under general suspicion, which nowadays every white person is who lives in a suburban area, that he or she would be racist, and the only reason why he or she wants to live in a suburban area would be that they want to live away and apart from black folks. However, but this is exactly one of those social upheavals people fear the most. And this led to Shane, one of the brainchilds of this, one brainchild of colored, who assume that they have brought together the best of two worlds. But what it really led to the fact is that Shane actually has nothing but contempt for other fellow blacks, and that he rather imagines himself as a little bit darker or sun-tanned white man, or even a southerner, a Mexican. Yet, because of his ability to talk to white people in the police precinct, this is how it was called and is called, being able to talk to white people. This means especially if you are a minority, you have to talk around them, you have to smooth them over, you have to convince them that they do not have to fear anything from you, so that everything is all right. This means actually being able to talk as a minority, as a black man, as a colored man, to other fellow white male. This is important, so that they do not fear you, do not see you as an ambitious black man who could, in a way, claim any leading position, and then, worst of all, could appeal to women. And some of these white males, they assume that women want nothing more than a man who stands on top, which is actually true. But however, this is the fear. So Shane gained a lot of support and comfort, and in the police precinct, and he then looked at James Duncan. He looked at James Duncan as a black man, as someone who is different from him. He looked over his records. He did not have any criminal record, and James and Thomas Duncan in his prison cell appears to be clean, to be healthy. He does not have any drug-related effects on his skin, on his identity. related effects like teeth, like skin. This is how, or eyes. This is how mostly many drug addicts look like, where people can immediately detect them, see through them, and understand that either way this person is lost. So either way, it would be only a matter of time until this person would become another issue for the state, another issue for the police force. And Thomas did not have any of these indication. And if people would see him, Shane understood, they would probably grasp that this is a normal guy, this is a normal, ordinary father who is working, that many black folks sadly assume that this would be rare, so he is not one of the hoods, he is not a drug addict, he is not one who is probably running any drug scheme, whatever. No, this is an ordinary guy, our working husband, a working father, and who has managed to get a job in the American post office. This is something remarkable. So this immediately protrudes throughout, and Shane then thinks about the appeal in the social media. How would this be perceived when Thomas Duncan would be found with drugs? So how would that be perceived? And he is sure of it now, that people would probably side with him, and especially he has no criminal records. So Shane pretty much dismissed this issue. This goes nowhere. Nothing is gained from him. Shane even imagines the fact that when he stands in front of the camera and claims that this man would be found in drug, and tries to assuage some notion that there was foul play, he would probably lose out his beautiful appeal. At least he thinks and assumes that his beautiful appeal would be destroyed, would be damaged significantly, and that it probably wasn't able to repair it anymore, because he understands that it mostly takes only little until this all comes down, and he wants to linger on in this current sphere, in this current situation, because he is the go-to black police officer in the precinct, and he likes it, he enjoys it, he is needed by all of them. He is even in high demand among black officers, among really black officers who think because Shane can talk to white folks, that whenever they have any grievances, they ask Shane for help. They always want him to accompany them when they have to talk to the chief, or when they have to talk to other fellow white police officers. So they need someone in the middle. This someone is Shane, and everyone assumes that Shane will one day become captain, because they think that only he can talk with both sides. I mean, Shane is still one of those people, those bridges that is needed even in the police precinct to some sort of overcome this racial gap. And there, in the past, there was an attempt to some sort of pair white policemen with black policemen or police women, that they assumed that when the law enforcement would some sort of present themselves as either having overcome racial differences or in a way appeal to the public that the police force would not be all white, but as well as they are multicultural, and that law enforcement or race within the law enforcement therefore becomes invisible, therefore would not play a role in anymore. This attempt has never taken off. While firstly that the police force, in the police force there is the majority in the police force are white policemen. So there are not enough, not only black police officers, but as well as minority police officers who would make it possible that you could always pair a white policeman or policewoman with a minority policeman or policewoman. And the second thing was, and there was some sort of an investigation whether this could be made possible, and the investigation brought forth that many whites as well as many black police officers said that in the wake of an assault or in the wake of duty where their lives could be in danger, they want someone they can trust. And apparently white police officers do not trust black police officers, and vice versa, because among black police officers there is the fear that once they have to investigate, racists or white nationalists, that the partner who should have their back, that this white partner would probably side with the enemy. Because this happened quite a lot when, for example, black police officers would appear in a crime scene, or there was some issue with a quarrel or what have you among white neighbors, and a black police officer would appear, that those whites would actually do not take this black police officer seriously. And sometimes, and this happens quite often, that they would call the police. So even though there is a police officer, even though there stands a police officer in front of them, they would still call another police officer a white one. And some of these white folks, they were even audacious enough to really demand a white police officer, someone who understands them, someone whom they can make understand their grievances, who talks and speaks the same language, who thinks that way. And therefore, you have to imagine what this means to a black police officer who is not taken as seriously as his fellow white police officers. This is a huge slap, and it is a social slap, and therefore you don't want to be paired with a white police officer, because then the white police officer, even though he would be your subordinate, would always be in charge, and people would rather talk to them than to you. And this is even happening in black communities. For example, if a black criminal has done something wrong, he does not try to convince the black police officer of his innocence. He assumes that he understands him already. No, he tries to convince the white police force that everything he did was righteous and that he did not do anything wrong, so that white police officers within the society and the police precinct, they have a certain authority that has been given to them through their skin color, and they dwarf everyone who is not white. This was one of the reasons why this internal investigation came to the conclusion that it is probably not very likely that people would be willingly admit or willingly want to be paired with another policeman or a policewoman who is not from the same race. So therefore the police precinct needs someone like Shane, the guy, to go to someone who is in the middle or appears to be in the middle, someone who can talk with these various groups, someone who knows his words and way around them. So, and this as well as led that Shane had some sort of an authority within the police precinct. And if Shane some sort of did not see how things could work out, people mostly trusted his judgment, and Shane looked at Thomas Duncan and he didn't saw anything that could, he didn't see anything that could help him. And this is what he says to Cliff Banderfield. He walks up to him, he sees that Cliff sits righteously in his chair, thinks and muses around him, that Cliff is in a new world, is in a different world, and he gets awakened now. Awakened by reality and awakened by what is actually possible. And Shane tells him that he has to let Thomas Duncan go. There is no way around it. This guy does not belong here. He is not a criminal, even though Cliff intervenes, tries to say, yeah, well, they will find drugs in his home. Shane doesn't want to hear anything, because then as Cliff sees Shane, he for the first time on this day, remembers the unwritten rule in the police precinct that they have to always, when they incarcerate minorities, they have to bring in a minority officer, a minority police officer who then makes it right, if you want, or who then verifies the truthfulness of the procedure, and that there would not be any way or any possibility to claim that this is racial injustice. And Cliff, for the first time, remembers it. And then he has to acknowledge, if Shane does not back him up on this all could be lost. So he tries to argue with him. What Cliff needs is to Shane to back him up so that he can move ahead with it. But Shane is reluctant, and because Shane is the go-to guy, Cliff understands that this is hopeless, so he has to let Thomas Duncan go. But even though Thomas Duncan has been let go, the damage has already been done, because only a couple of hours before, Mr. Reynolds called from the post office. He did not know the name Thomas Duncan before. He was just a mere employee. But after what he witnessed due to Frederick Malham, he got an interest, because what was this all about? He became Mr. Reynolds became curious. He wanted to know what was this all about, and he did not like that apparently one of his employees is some sort of involved with these kind of people, with these drug addicts, because Mr. Reynolds got pretty much aware that Frederick Malham was either insane or drug addict. So he wanted to get rid of this person, because he felt himself pretty much embarrassed by this guy, by this no-name, by this person whom he had not met before. So he made some inquiries, and there he immediately found the file of Thomas Duncan. And he then had some friends who know someone in the police precinct, and then Mr. Reynolds called there. He wanted to know what was this all about. What was Frederick Malham talking about, that this guy was incarcerated, and who was he? And more and more things got shape, because then this phone call reached Cliff Banderfield. Cliff assured Mr. Reynolds that Thomas Duncan would be a drug dealer, and that they actually had found drugs in his home, because Cliff was sure of it, that Frederick and Jason would plant the drugs there, and that he then after a while would go in there like a hero and find the drugs and get his reward, no matter how stupid it might seem. Just all this mess just for one person. But for Cliff, this was something personal. It had become something personal. And after Cliff assured to Mr. Reynolds that they have the guy, and that it is only a matter of time until he is convicted, Mr. Reynolds heard everything he wanted to hear. That there is someone who has been dealing apparently drugs. He doesn't want anyone of this kind in his precinct, because this additionally drove a wedge into his heart and made Mr. Reynolds thoughtful, because he thought he already does not have the entire post office under his thumb. He is well aware that everyone in a way does everything he wants, and he knows that he is probably only in charge due to the goodwill of his employees. But having a drug addict among their midst came to him as some sort of a hidden niche where they probably go to, or where they probably conspire against him or even mock of him. He thought of this niche like children who have a secret place they want to keep away and keep out of sight of their parents. And this was fearful for Mr. Reynolds. He was scared. He was scared because he feared that he would not be taken seriously. And this is what many people fear, especially when they are in charge and they set up, they intuitively know that they actually have not really deserved it, or that they would not have the skill for it. And the only reason why they are in charge is because they have a lot of forthcoming subordinates, but they fear that things could change and that things could go south. And the worst thing what an unskilled superior fears is that he will be either mocked at or that he will not be taken seriously anymore. And one of the worst case scenarios of a superior is when he gives an instruction to one of his subordinates, that this subordinate does not follow the instruction, does not obey it for whatever reason. And this could then be some sort of an avalanche, starting with a small snowball, and then it buries everything underneath, buries the career and the life of Mr. Reynolds. And this was the reason, the fear he has, and therefore this is why he decided that Thomas Duncan, by no reason whatsoever, even though if he walks free, should be dismissed immediately. He should be fired immediately. That there is no place in his post office for a drug dealer. And he even instructed his secretary to write a flyer claiming that the post office, that they will not excuse any drug related issue, and everyone who is found with drugs in the post office while he's having duty will be fired immediately. And this was the end of Thomas Duncan's working contract